Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. If you are here for the Department of Commerce Landlord Mitigation Program webinar, you are in the right place. I'm Alexis Eichel with the Tacoma Housing Authority. I am the Landlord Engagement Specialist, and I am pleased to introduce you all to Nicholas Yuva with the Department of Commerce. And so we are going to go ahead and Nicholas is going to do the presentation first, and we will open it up for questions and answers. And if you have any questions you want answered, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And I'm going to turn it over to Nicholas. Thank you, Nicholas, for joining us today.
Thank you, Alexis. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. And I'll just give a slight introduction, kind of pass some time, let some other folks join in on the presentation. Meantime, I'm going to go ahead and share this screen. So my name is Nick Yuva. You also see as Nicholas. Either one's fine. But I am the Landlord Mitigation Administrator for the Department of Commerce. This program initiated in 2018 and has since grown into multiple programs. A couple have come and gone. There are 3 programs that are still in effect, and I'll go through those today. I'll talk about one which has been a very big topic of discussion that is no longer available, but I do want to cover that. And we'll go through that one by one. Do put your questions in the Q&A. We'll get to those at the end of the presentation. I do go through a lot of information. We have a lot of time. I won't take up all of it. I'll probably give you some of your lunch break back, but I do want to go through this and the website for your questions and answers. So Commerce offers several different programs. We've grown incredibly over the last couple of years. We've doubled in our size. We are fully remote now, though we do have a footprint, a retail office down in Olympia and a couple of hub offices out there. Folks can go in and work there out of choice, but ultimately most of our staff is remote. But we're operating almost 400 programs now, which is huge. The vast majority of those fall under, about 25% of those fall under the housing and homelessness. So that's the largest bulk of our programming. And the Landlord Mitigation Program is part of the housing and homeless. Oh, it looks like I lost my mic. 1 second there.
Yep, I can hear you.
You can hear me just fine? Good.
Yeah, your camera.
Now, my camera, I've had to order a new one. It hasn't gotten here yet.
That's fine.
So we're going to start with the statewide vendor number. This number is required for all claim submissions. It's a number that the state of Washington requires that you register for, and you tell them how you want to receive payment from the state of Washington. Without this, you can't receive payment. So once you submit this documentation to the Office of Financial Management, it's not handled by my department. This is a different state office. It's free, takes about 3 to 5 days to get. Once you have it, you can start submitting your claims. You only need one. Though depending on how your bookkeeping is, if you have multiple properties, you may want a different one for each property, or if you have multiple owners and your fee management company, you may want to set them up for each individual owner, because you will receive 1099s at the end of the year based on the payments issued to that number. So for accounting, it's pretty nice to have different numbers for each property or each owner. But for your purposes, if you just have a few properties of your own, you only need one. You need to keep it updated. They do block and purge these numbers after a couple of years if there's no activity. So keep it up to date with the Office of Financial Management. Otherwise, once you have it, you're good to go. You can submit your claims. Now, the 3 programs that we have that are available now are the Landlord Damage Relief Program, the Tenancy Preservation Program, and the Survivor Relief Program. I'll speak in detail on each of those in a moment. The big one that we're going to talk a little bit about is the Landlord COVID Relief Program that closed on April 29th of 2022. That was the $15,000 for unpaid rents from March of 2020 through December 2021. And that program has spent out. We have approved over $40 million in that program alone. But we're still waiting on funding for a lot of the payments in that program. So we had to close that program down. But our funding sources are through legislative appropriations. This year alone, we got $27 million in appropriations to help pay a large portion of that landlord COVID relief program. We also get document recording fees. These have been increased over the last few years. Initially, we got $1.20 per document recording fee from real estate transactions throughout the state of Washington. Now we're up to almost $4 per transaction that we're receiving for this program. Now, something that's really important before you file a claim with this program is you have to understand that when you receive funds from this program, landlords are prohibited from pursuing legal or collection action against the tenant for damages, and I'll get to that word in a second, and unpaid rents for March of 2020 through December 2021. Regardless of the program, this applies whenever you receive this. Now, damages is a very tricky word. We can assume it means physical damage, but there's an S on the end, and legally speaking, when you add the S to damages in the RCWs, that can include any financial loss. Now, so far, I haven't heard of any lawsuits for landlords trying to pursue lease break charges or anything else that aren't covered by the program, but there is potential risk there. So be cautious and probably speak with an attorney before pursuing collection actions or legal action against the tenant for any charges that aren't covered by the program. Now, damage relief program. This is the initial program. This one's been around since 2018. This was designed to help with two different stages of the tenancy. This applies when you have a tenant that receives a rental subsidy or is going to receive a rental subsidy. Rental subsidy is any form of payment for rent from a nonprofit or government agency. The exception being landlord mitigation programs. So you couldn't have received payment from the COVID relief program and then be approved for this. You have to receive it from a different agency or different government agency, or not agency, but different government program. So the first part is if they're moving in, they fail a subsidy inspection, an HQS inspection, and that landlord decides to make repairs to that unit. That landlord can receive up to $1,000 in reimbursement for those repairs. That's above and beyond the initial $500. And they can receive up to 14 days of unpaid rent for taking the time to make those repairs to move that subsidized tenant into the unit. This program does require a failed inspection, a passing inspection, and the rental agreement and move-in condition report. A landlord may then would become qualified, since the tenant subsidized, would become qualified for up to $5,000 in damages throughout the tenancy or up to a year after the move out. Now that, in this case, the tenant would receive a rental subsidy. They may not be required to go through an inspection, but they may have received a one-time rental subsidy, such as Catholic Community Charities, or maybe a rapid rehousing for a limited time, or a lifetime award through like a housing choice voucher. Any of these types, doesn't have to be those specific agencies, but any of these types of subsidies will qualify a landlord to receive this. Now, unpaid rents, utilities, and other charges, these can be included once the tenant moves out. They can't cover rent while the tenant's in the unit or utility charges, but they can be claimed once the tenant has vacated the rental unit. So now I kind of want to circle around this a little bit, because we're talking about how you can make claims during tenancy, but also after move out. You can make multiple claims. You're capped at $5,000 per tenant household. Now, so you can make 10 $500 claims on this program and receive all $5,000, or you can make a couple of claims. Do keep in mind, move out's the most expensive time, so you really want to keep about $2,500 to $3,000 cushion for that move out. That seems to be about where we're averaging the move out costs. Obviously, right now is a little bit of an anomaly because we're having a lot of folks move out from the evictions proceedings from non-payment of rent during the moratorium periods, or else, and there's much higher costs that are being claimed. But the average throughout the life of the program has been about $3,000 for a turnover. Then lease break charges and rent responsibility and deposit forfeitures. These are fees that are not eligible for reimbursement. We made this decision early on. We spoke with stakeholders on this, and ultimately we can't run the risk of landlords receiving double rents if they have someone move in during a lease break period, and we're not going to chase these down. Same with rent responsibility, and then deposit forfeitures, we just don't pay as practice. Landlord will receive the payment directly from Department of Commerce. So once your claim is approved, on an average year, we could get payments within about 2 to 4 weeks. But right now, due to high claim volume, with all of the turnover that's happening, we're actually seeing a much longer delay in payments, even though we're getting more income. We've doubled our claims this year, so we're taking a little bit longer. It's taking about 3 months to get your payment to you. But it does come directly from Commerce. You will receive a letter of guarantee upon claim approval. And then on top of that, you'll get the notification through email when that payment is processed and being issued. So yeah, the 5 to 6 weeks is still even not long enough. It is really about 3 months at this point. The COVID relief program, I talked about this a little bit. It did close on April 29th. And the payments can take over 1 year to be received. If you filed a COVID relief claim and you're waiting on that payment, we haven't forgotten about you. We're just waiting for that funding to get there. Now, we did just pay a large bulk of them. We're down to about $7 million of claims that are waiting for funding. I am meeting with the legislation on December 10th. We did put in a funding request, a large funding request. We're going to talk about that on the TPP program because that's also affected by this long delay. And then we're going to meet in January and hopefully get some new funding on this next legislative session. Tenancy Preservation Program. This is a great program, especially right now with these huge balances. There's no cap on this program. So landlords, I've seen claims of $30,000, $40,000 come through. We have a prioritization of payments set up on these programs through legislation. So the damage relief and the survivor relief program, those claims get paid first, and whatever's left over pays the tenancy preservation and the landlord COVID relief program. So that's why this one has a very long period to wait. It is guaranteed once your claim is approved, but it is a fantastic way to get those funds in the landlord's hands over time right now. And then, of course, making that tenant current. So you're going to go with this one, the court's going to have to find that the tenant is low income, limited resource, or under financial hardship. So this is when you're in court for an eviction for non-payment of rent. The tenant will be awarded a 0 interest loan from the Department of Commerce. So they do have to be involved a little bit. They have to sign that tenant acknowledgement form, accepting the fact that they are taking out a loan. We don't have a collection agency. We're not going to go hounding the tenant if they're not paying, especially with these huge balances. Though if they do choose to pay it back through the courts, once it's paid off, they'll have access to this again. If they don't pay it off, they won't have access to this program again. The tenant will remain in the rental unit for the period, at least for the minimum period that's covered under the law, which is up through the judgment date and up to 3 months prospective rent that we will pay. So you could claim if you have a tenant that's behind, they have $15,000, $16,000 in unpaid rent, you get a judgment for that $15,000 to $16,000, and of course court costs and attorney fees can be included. And then on top of that, you claim up to 3 months of future rent. And we're going to cover all of that for you. It's just going to take us a while to get that payment to you. But once you have that payment, and ultimately during that waiting period, you need to set that portion of rent aside. Don't give notice on it. Don't take them to court over it. If they're late on the 4th month after that judgment date, then you can proceed with an eviction. You'll still get your payment from the Tenancy Preservation Program. We've made that award to you, and the tenants agreed to the terms. So we're going to still honor that, but you can't evict for that period, those rents over that period of time. And again, I mentioned there's no collection period, and payment should not be expected for at least 1 year from the date of approval. So definitely well worth it to get those large balances covered, but it will take time to get the payment to you. The Survivor Relief Program, this is brand new, well, newish, I should say, launched in June of this year. It's really a great program for folks, tenants that are fleeing domestic violence, sexual assault, unlawful harassment, or stalking. They have to, this is a little tricky to get into, but this program's protected from public record disclosure. There won't be any information from this program shared with anybody other than the claimant and the Department of Commerce. Landlord must return the full security deposit to qualify for this program. So the only time this becomes an issue is if you have the abuser and the survivor in the same household. The survivor flees, but the abuser doesn't. So obviously you don't want to waive your security deposit. In those instances, you're probably not going to qualify for this program. But we're going to reimburse you up to $5,000 for repairs if you do qualify for this program. The tenant may have left with little or no notice. That's an agreement that you have to make with that tenant to allow them out of their rent, out of their lease, out of their apartment, give them their deposit back, and then you apply to this program. You want to make sure you understand the program before you agree to all this, of course, because there are some documents that are required to be approved. In this instance, like I said, the tenant does have to be involved to some degree because we're going to need something to substantiate the event that qualified the tenant. That can be a police report, that could be a restraining order, that could also even be a self-affidavit that's notarized with the tenant's signature. So we're trying to make it easy, but we do have to substantiate it to some degree. And that's the red line on the bottom. Qualifying status must be supportive of documentation. And now we're already at the frequently asked questions. These are going to be quick and easy, and then I'll get to your questions and open it up for any other questions as we go along. But how long does the review process take? You're going to submit your claim. You'll get a response to your claim within about 3 to 5 business days. Again, depending on the program, the funding can take up to between 3 months or over a year, depending on the program that you apply to. You'll receive that notification in your email as to what the timeline to expect, but you should just expect that it's going to be over a year unless you're applying to the damage or survivor relief programs. Those are paid within about 3 months. And the next question is, can you file an appeal? The answer is no. Typically what happens is we don't like denying claims. We're going to work with you to get that claim approved. More often than not, if you get a denial email, it's because there's some documentation that's missing. If you get that back to us, we're just going to turn it from a denial to an approval. If for any reason we cannot get past something, you just don't have the documents, or you didn't have the tenant sign a move-in condition report, we're not going to be able to appeal that. We have to be fair and consistent across the board for all claimants. So no individual landlord will get preferential treatment. So there's the only way you could really overturn any decision made at Commerce is to receive a judgment at court and submit it. So if you can prove to a court that if for some reason those charges are valid, even though you may have been lacking some documentation or something, get that judgment to us and we'll issue payment based on that. With that, I am going to switch over to our website here so I can answer questions and go through the actual steps. Let's see here. Here we go. Try to center this for myself. There we go. Let's look at the Q&A first. I got one question there. It says they submitted a claim in July. I've not seen any money. How long is the delay? As mentioned, depending on the program, it can take 3 months on the damage relief program, a little bit longer on some other pieces. I'd really have to talk to you one-on-one with your claim number. So if you want to email us with your claim number, we can get you a better feel where what's gone on with your payment. I will tell you, if you haven't updated your statewide vendor numbers, sometimes they kick back. And if you put in a bad email address, maybe you're not getting the claim responses that you're expecting. But yeah, do reach out to us with your claim number, or at the very least your statewide vendor number and tenant name and the claim type, so we can find your claim and work through that with you. See, we got a couple things in chat. Okay, good. That was just Alexis. So going through the website, I'll walk you through each of these programs again. The website is very simple. I'll put it in the chat even. It's Commerce. It looks longer up top, but I've got an easy way to get there. commerce.wa.gov/landlord fund. There's fund with a D on the end. If you go to that website, this is what you'll see. You'll get your choice of the 3 programs. I actually have some really good news I'm going to share at this point, because we've got a brand new portal that's coming out early in 2023. That portal is going to give you a lot of access to that you haven't had before in our system, which is going to include historical claim data. It's going to show you real time where your payment is in the process. It's going to show you a lot of information. It's going to autofill information off of your entries based on the statewide vendor number. It's really going to be a really fantastic tool for everybody. That's going to launch in 2023. Right now, it's going to look similar to this when you get in there, and I won't go through the new portal until it's launched and we've tested it. But right now, if you want to file a claim, you would go to, for instance, the Landlord Damage Relief Program. It'll open up the claim page, which goes into detail about the program. There's a section on each of these pages that covers the documents that are required. And if you're curious about the data, we have metrics on the page as well, showing all the real-time data. So as an example, since 2018, this program has paid over $12 million in damage relief claims. The average amount is about $2,400. Right now it's going up. It's a little bit higher this year, obviously, because of the volume and the number of claims, or the number of dollars that are owed on the ledgers. We do have about $3.3 million, almost $3.4 million that haven't been paid, and this box here explains why. Missing move-in, move-out condition report. This is required under the RCW. There are no exceptions to this rule. So if there's not a move-in, move-out condition report signed by the tenant at the time of move-in, we can't approve the claim. And this is all other documentation that might be missing. This is just that one form that's causing that huge amount of denial. Charge is not covered by the program. This is not necessarily denial. These are typically adjustments. So we pull out the lease break charges, we pull out the early termination charges, rent responsibility, deposit forfeiture, and we also prorate carpeting. So if you're going to submit a claim that has carpet replacement, we need to know the age of that carpet. And the way you show that to us is through the invoice for the previous carpet, a certificate of occupancy if it was new when the tenant moved in, or if you or the tenant had written new on the flooring line of the move-in condition report when the tenant moved in. We can use those 3 things to establish the life expectancy, well, the lifetime of the carpet. The prorate is based on a 7-year lifespan. So if you have carpets that are 5 years old, we're going to pay 2/7 of that claim, or of that amount anyway. And up here shows by county how many claims. It's a little skewed because obviously King County is our greatest claimant. So you can't really see these down here, but if you hover over them, you'll see many of the counties are included. There's been 3 in Garfield County, 25 in Cowlitz. They look small, but they're there. You just have to hover over them. So, and then the tenancy preservation program, very much the same thing. This one's a little held up on the payments, but we're seeing claims come in right now. We have 351,000 in approved claims. And then, of course, a lot of these are waiting on funding right now. And this was included in our ask to the legislature. Survivor relief program, it's a very slow start. Opened up in June. We don't have any real data to share on this because I've only had 3 claims and all of them were denied because they didn't have the proper documentation. So, but if you're curious about this, it's worth reading through. It's well worth it if you feel like you can make your repairs within $5,000. Honestly, it's probably worth it just to do it simply because chasing down debt is always a problem for landlords. It always has been, always will be, especially in folks that are struggling in life. So if you can get $5,000, and we're finding a lot of folks are doing that right now, they're writing off a lot of debt just to get the $5,000, knowing that it's better to take the 5,000 now than to just chase after a tenant for amounts they're likely never going to pay. And if you go through a collection agency, you're only going to get half of what they collect anyway. So don't have to worry about that.